Hello and welcome to another Auto Buyer's Guide podcast. Today we're going to be talking about the features you should avoid, or maybe the features you should get if you want the longest lasting new car. So be sure and stay tuned for that. We're also going to be talking safety ratings, tariffs, LexisNexis, which is not a Toyota division, by the way, and the car shopping process advice by Travis and yours truly. So Travis, are you as sad as I am that we have had no new 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts?
You know, it's disappointing. We try to be in here week in and week out. We're usually pretty good about that. Last week was a little bit busy, but we're here for you guys. And it's good to know if you're liking it or not. So if you are, you can go ahead and leave likes and comments and 5-star reviews. Let us know that we are your favorite podcast or close or up there.
Yep. You know, I was changing Elizabeth's diaper yesterday and she started
It's
to
all
cry, and then I started to cry, and Rob said, why are you making fun of the baby and mimicking and crying along with the baby? And I said, I'm not. I'm crying because we have no 5-star reviews that are new.
No, it's so sad. It's
I
so
know.
sad. We'll be here next week, but hopefully
Yeah.
there are a few more reviews for us.
And nobody changed my diaper. That was the problem, too.
That's probably for the best, I think,
Turned
for
out
all parties involved.
I was wet. This is a total tangent, but I will say, we get asked this by friends that have kids now. They're like, "Oh, what has it thrown you for a loop, etc." And I have to admit, strangely enough, that I think we were pretty clear-eyed, and you know me, I'm a pessimist anyway, so
Yep.
I assumed it was all going to be all kinds of wrong.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing I did not expect was exactly how much mental power we were going to be using to think about and discuss poop.
Yeah, and how important it would be in the daily lives.
Yeah. The questions are always, did she poop? How much did she poop? And what did it look like? And what, blah.
Right. Do we need to examine the poop? I understand
Yeah.
that. Yeah. Sorry for folks who are listening to this on their drive to work. But life happens at all times.
But everyone that has children will suddenly understand now. And apparently now I'm in the club, because now I'm like, now I get it.
We understand it.
now I get that part. Anyway.
Yeah.
So what features would you want to avoid if you wanted your car to last, let's just say 200,000 miles? This is a question by a viewer, which I thought was kind of an interesting one.
Yeah, I mean, let's start off with very few people are buying their car for 200,000 mile usage, and that makes this a little bit tough because that means cars are not necessarily being built with that in mind, especially for the first owner, which is the person who gives the manufacturer the money in the first place. So as we start loading on features, we start adding in room and like we're literally creating the spaces for those features to fail. One that I wish I could be a little bit more, I guess, whiny about, that probably is not going to be terribly unreliable or, create an issue down the road, is a passenger screen. And so, and I say that because that's going to be pretty simple, pretty basic, and I don't think it's going to go a whole lot of use. But that's one where I wish I could say, oh, and you know what? This is just going to break down in the future. You're going to have to repair it. But that's one I don't think is the biggest one for me, probably going to be an air suspension. I think that's going to be one of those standouts that is going to get significant use. It's constant wear and tear, right? While the vehicle is driving, it is being not abused, but certainly utilized. And it's got a lifetime on it, whether it's going to be an air pump or airbags or those sorts of things. And when that goes, your car is probably getting towed. That's not one of those like, oh yeah, we need to pull over and get that fixed. That's probably a tow truck.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, because all suspension dampers are going to need to get replaced eventually. Although I will say, shocks, lifetime of a new car shock today is shocking. Sorry for that. Yeah. Sorry for that pun. But they really last a long time. I mean, this is not the days of yore where, maybe every 40, 50,000 miles you had to replace it so that way you didn't feel like you were driving a trampoline.
Right.
But air suspensions definitely don't have that same lifetime. And, 10 years or about 100,000 miles is probably what you can expect from the average airbag setup there.
Yeah.
And that does get pricey. I had a Jaguar XJ whose airbags were slowly leaking. And thankfully they don't pop. They just slowly leak.
Yeah.
And every time you turn on the car, you have to wait for it to pump up, or you might get a suspension error, etc. but those puppies are pricey, which is why I never bothered replacing them. We just lived with the slow sinkage until we
Yeah.
finally decided to give up.
See, and that's one where on a used car, I'm not saying don't buy a used car with an air suspension, but understand where it's at in its life
Hmm.
cycle and probably
Yeah.
something that you want to factor in. If you want to keep this vehicle for a long time, you might want to go ahead and get on top of that and build that repair into your operational costs. And once you're done, then you
Hmm.
can not worry about it as much, right? You go ahead and get the
Yeah,
airbags replaced, whatever, make sure the suspension's good, and then move on and enjoy your vehicle. But yeah, that's one of those that it adds a lot to a car. It
it
really does.
does.
I mean, it's not just the ride height adjustment, but for some people that's going to be a huge plus. Things like Rivians are going to be way more efficient down in the low end and have all that ground clearance up at the top. But that's a lot of usage of that system. Not one where you're going to want to let it fail, but it also makes it so much more comfortable. Air
It
suspension does a
does.
really good job of making it for a comfortable ride, which is why so many, especially big SUVs and luxury SUVs, have them. Man, that's a tough one, but yes, that's probably
Yeah.
the first one that jumps out to me.
And it also improves towing stability and general drive stability if you're in, say, a pickup truck and you're at or near your max payload for the truck. I will say that there are a very limited number of exceptions here. So if you are looking at, for instance, a vehicle that has an air suspension along the lines of the Ram 2500
Mhm.
or the old GMT 360 series of SUVs, Trailblazer, Saab 97X, Buick and the Oldsmobile, everybody had one, right? Those kinds of air suspensions, the airbags in the rear are simply providing additional lift to compensate for more weight in the back end. So they're not
Right, the
supporting the
load
entire
leveling.
vehicle. Right. They're not supporting the entire vehicle all the time. They are not the active damper kind of air suspension components. So those are much less expensive and they tend to be cheaper to replace and easier to replace yourself. But as other than that, I think I would also focus on transmission types. So if you really are that kind of person that wants to keep your car for, over 10 years, over 200,000 miles, I would say pay attention to just make sure all the drivetrain systems are tried and true. So that way there's a history behind them. Higher volume is always going to be better. So if we're talking Honda V6 engine, Toyota's 8-speed automatic transmission, Chrysler's Pentastar 3.6 liter V6, millions and millions of those are out there. Um, so repair parts are going to be easier. There's going to be a history, et cetera, on these components. I would steer away from dual clutch transmissions and CVTs both. CVTs obviously have had a bad rep over the last few decades because of Nissan. But I will say that there are some still unanswered questions, and this is just sort of an unknown thing. We don't know really how long Honda's CVT, for instance, will last in Civic and CRV, et cetera.
Mhm.
One would assume longer than the Jatco CVTs, ditto Toyota's CVTs, and we're talking their true CVTs in Corolla, rather than the eCVT, which is what they call their planetary power split hybrid system in Prius, etc. So Toyota's hybrids, not a worry. In fact, I actually might go towards a Toyota hybrid for longevity.
Mhm.
Also, if you have choices out there, stay away from things like cylinder deactivation. If you're really worried about soot buildup on your intake valves, steer away from engines that have just direct injection. Go for engines that
Mhm.
have port and direct or just port injection. Also, stay away from advanced safety systems. Not all of the safety systems we see standard in a large number of vehicles out there are legislatively required yet. And, I kind of like them all, and I probably would want them. But if you want that long-term low cost of operation, long-term reliability, you might want to stay away from those.
It's a weird thing, but it's just the longer the list, the less
Hmm.
reliable it will be. Just again
Hmm.
by default. I will say one that you mentioned that is a little bit tough for me. The CVT is one of those technologies that has only been introduced within the last a couple decades, right? And
Yeah.
it's ramped up, and it's one of those that is getting better, basically generation over generation. So I don't disagree with you that they have a bad rap and they've earned them to some degree. It's not one that really bothers me, but knowing that this system has by and large been less reliable, that means don't pick that one. But it's tough because if you're looking to buy a
Hmm.
new car and you want the newest of the new, which is the reason you buy a new car, I have such a tough time with, hey, this is a brand new model, and it's a new model, and it's a new interior, and it's new components, but it's also a new powertrain. That's sort of
Hmm.
the worst case scenario.
It
My
is where
favorite
things
of
go
that,
wrong.
yeah, my favorite of that though is we're carrying over the powertrain, so engine, transmission, et cetera, and we're putting the new body on it and the new components. That's the
Hmm.
one where I say, okay, you know, the ones that are going to cost you the most money, that are the most important to you, are tried and true. They've been there the last 3, 4, maybe even 5 years before they did this generational leap. That probably is the way I go. And then at that point, you have a choice. You know, let's just say it's a 25 model year or 26.
Hmm.
Um, and you get to say, oh, I like this about that one. Actually, the first one that comes to mind is actually something like the Subaru Outback, because there's a significant body change from 25 to 26, but the powertrain is staying the same. And so you
Hmm.
can say, hey, I really like the 25 over the 26, and if you're going to do this for a long time, that car is going to be in your driveway for a very long time. So you don't want to pick the wrong one, and that
Yep.
way you kind of have choices.
Although it does have that CVT.
I
CVTs
understand
have
that.
been around for quite some time, actually, longer than you and I combined, because the first,
Yes.
true production one was in a DAF or DAF. I don't know how we're supposed to pronounce it. A Dutch car company in 1958, I believe it was. And then Volvo toyed with them for a little bit, but those early ones were truly terrible. Um, they are fantastic for fuel economy and drivability, if I'm perfectly honest. There are just so many unanswered questions right now about this modern crop of CVTs there. Now, things that I wouldn't be worried about that I think classically people have been worried about, I wouldn't worry about power windows or power seats. I wouldn't worry about automatic transmissions in general.
Mm-hmm.
Some limited exceptions there, of course. Most automatic transmissions are well tuned and fairly well designed. The Ford 10 speed and the GM 10 speed that has been in the co-developed transmission between those two manufacturers, it does appear that there's some issues cropping up now. So we'll have to keep an eye on that and see exactly if there is a problem or not.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also not overly concerned about auto start stop systems if we're talking about the average American drive cycle,
Mm-hmm.
where you're really not spending that many miles in situations where you'd be starting and stopping the engine that frequently. If we're
Yeah,
talking
stuck
about,
in traffic is where
yeah,
that you're going to start to see that. And then the question is it like a mild hybrid system
yeah,
that really is designed for that to be
hmm,
easier on all the components, or is it, hey, we put this in for legislative reasons, we need to cut down our
yeah,
fuel economy for the test cycles, and this really isn't designed for it. And
hmm,
actually, I wanted to touch on the cylinder deactivation, because that's one of those, again, technologies on paper that I absolutely love. And
hmm,
I think most people don't consider this. You know, a lot of the vehicles we drive today, especially like in hybrids and EVs, they'll tell you the overall power output. So not just your RPMs, but it says, basically the percentage of power you're
right,
using. And I
hmm,
think people have this assumption that in a 300 horsepower vehicle, you're using, near that 300 horsepower often, and you just absolutely are not. Especially when you're doing 60 and 70 miles per hour cruising, you'll be 100 horsepower or less
yeah.
at those
Oh, way
cruising
less.
speeds,
Yeah, way less than
right?
100 horsepower.
Right, but when that's the case and you can deactivate those cylinders,
Hmm.
and you're just not utilizing, that extra combustion, that's a great way to save gas. But
Yeah,
again, we've seen that those systems have problems, and honestly, that's one that bothers me. I just
yeah,
wish I don't know how we fix that. I don't know if you can swap which ones are being
hmm.
deactivated, and if that somehow levels it out, but
You
you might know
can.
more about that than I do.
Yeah, and it sort of depends on which cylinder deactivation system we're talking about. It seems that GM has had the most trouble with it, even though they've had the most interesting cylinder deactivation systems for a while. And I will
Mm,
clarify that the issues seem to currently be centered around their traditional cylinder deactivation setup. The one that the Chrysler group of companies, which I'll instead of
huh,
Stellantis, we'll just call it Chrysler for the purposes here
sure,
because it's easier.
they'll love that.
The Hemis, they have been a bit more reliable in the cylinder deactivation space than the GM engines. They use it on a slightly broader profile. The
Okay.
system is differently designed in those vehicles as well. Now there are other issues with the Hemi, the knocking and ticking that you can get, the Hemi tick, which doesn't seem to be a true usability problem. There are plenty of ticking Hemis out there with well over 100,000 miles. And then there's Honda's cylinder deactivation system, which has been a little problematic as well in some of their V6 engines. So they all use slightly different designs for deactivating the cylinder. But the basic theory here is that an engine has a particular efficiency band where the amount of power it's producing versus the amount of fuel it's consuming is optimum. And this is not low output and it's not high output either. It's somewhere roughly in the middle, but towards the lower end of the power band. So it makes sense in, say, a V8 engine to turn off 4 of the cylinders, have the other 4 cylinders work twice as hard, and then you actually are saving fuel because it's more efficient to put a little bit more fuel and a little bit more air in those cylinders only and
Mhm.
drive down the road. The reason historically that you haven't wanted to do this under a broader range of speeds and load conditions, usually it's just sort of steady state highway cruising, is that the harmonics get a little bit funky. So in a vehicle with cylinder deactivation, especially a louder exhaust cylinder deactivation, like for instance the SRT Durango that we own, you
Hmm.
can definitely hear when 4-cylinder mode engages. And as you start demanding a little bit more power, you dig a little bit deeper in the accelerator pedal in 4-cylinder mode, you'll really
Hmm.
hear that unusual exhaust note and maybe a little bit of vibration as well, because a 4-cylinder engine is not naturally balanced. So
Right.
that's why they turn the mode off if you need more power. GM has an interesting twist here where they have basically skip cylinder technology. And there, the engine will fire in all sorts of interesting patterns. So it can deactivate 1 cylinder or technically 7 cylinders, and it can actually cause the firing order to sort of skip around the engine to try and keep it in better balance. And
Hmm.
in those vehicles, it's much less noticeable. In fact, you'd really be hard pressed to know that the engine is doing any of that skipping around. It's just more expensive, and
Right.
it does appear that there have been some issues with that. We just don't know long term, so I would steer clear of it. Also, on the systems that I wouldn't worry about too much would be turbos for the
Hmm.
average person driving, unless we're talking about super high output engines. Most of the turbos you'll find in the mainstream vehicles, they're very reliable. So, Toyota's 2.4-liter turbo sounds like a bucket of bolts in a cement mixer, but it's probably going to be real reliable. It's a pretty
Tell me
gruff
how you
engine.
really feel.
It's a pretty gruff engine.
Yeah.
GM's tiny 1.2 and 1.3 liter turbos, I don't really see any long-term issues with the turbo, I should say,
Right.
in those engines.
Because they're
Also,
not pushing too hard.
right, they're not pushing too
They're
hard.
providing a little assist, but they're
Hmm.
not really cranking the internals to anywhere
Yeah.
near their stressors.
And turbo bearings and turbo cooling has become significantly better. Material science is significantly better than it was in the
Mhm.
80s, where a lot of people had some issues with turbos in the US. Just look at Europe, where turbos are everywhere and have been for quite some time.
Small material science, injection here because this is our podcast and we often go on tangents. You're familiar with the Seattle area. Do
Hmm.
you know the Montlake Bridge near the University of Washington?
No, I do not.
Okay, well, it's in a movie, Boys in the Boat. But anyway, it's our drawbridge, right? It's
Oh,
our
okay.
pass through to the
How does that
to
drawbridge open
Montlake.
again?
A little bit like this.
Okay, okay.
Um, and uh, and the other day, I saw a post from the Washington State Department of Transportation that said, "Bear with us. There may be some delays. It's no longer than the bridge opening and closing, but we are running a spray truck over it
Oh,
due to the heat, so that it
yes.
doesn't get stuck." And I
Yep.
went, I haven't lived around there. I haven't seen that a bunch, but that's the first time I've ever heard about that. Seattle's not known for getting super super hot, and it was pretty warm. I think we were in the mid upper 90s. But I went, I wonder if a sprinkler system had ever been considered, or if they knew this was likely to be a problem, or if we just didn't expect this sort of heat. But it just feels, it doesn't feel very efficient to just have this truck on standby, running laps every once in a while, spraying it with some cold water. Just not what I would have expected here in the year of 2025. That we just needed to go ahead and cool
Yeah,
down the bridge so it doesn't get stuck closed.
that is a thing.
Material,
Yeah.
material engineering.
Yep. Metals do expand, and my
Yeah,
guess would be that they just didn't expect it to get on average that hot. So,
yeah. Anyway,
oopsie.
sorry, fun
Yeah.
interjection, but there you go.
Fun tangent. So, how many miles do you have on your old truck?
My old truck has about 125,000. I've had
Oh,
it
low
for
miles.
3 or so years and have only put,
But it's,
gosh, 10,000
what
miles on it.
model year?
The 94 Chevy K2500.
So,
It's got
yep,
the
so
small block, so the 5.7, I believe.
yep, so
Yep.
definitely old. I have
Yep.
a 2000 Grand Cherokee with 228,000 miles on it, and
And which is
so
crazy because that
so
lives on the
what
property now. It doesn't go very far.
yeah, so what doesn't work? This will be a fun one. What doesn't work on your truck?
Oh god, that one's sort of a pain point right now. The first one is the paint. The paint doesn't work right
Oh,
now.
yeah, but I mean, I paint
I know.
yeah.
So when I got it, I was told everything is in really good shape, and by and large, it was, but it hadn't been driven. So a maintenance issue that came up was
Mhm,
lots
mhm,
of
mhm.
seals. It also didn't like to start very much.
And not the kind that they're cute and balance a ball on their nose.
Correct. The ones that are expensive and in engine bays. Yeah.
Mhm, mhm.
So I put a lot of money into that, and we needed new tires again, regular maintenance item, but they need new tires. Then it had a start-in issue, and we got that sorted out. Round one of my efforts didn't work. Round two of the mechanics did, so that's good. But then it wouldn't turn off. That was a fun one. The key got locked in the on position.
Mm.
Basically, at Christmas night, it was below freezing, and I had to kill my truck because I couldn't leave it running all night. That was a weird moment. I won't dive into it now or how I did it, but that truck was ceased operation for a moment, and then to fire it back up, you just had to reverse what you did because the ignition was already on. But what doesn't work? Not a lot. I mean, by and
Okay.
large, everything is in really good shape, which is one of the reasons I'm keeping the truck. It needs some maintenance stuff. I had to replace the battery the other day. I think I've got a weird power draw, but that's likely from some of the aftermarket accessories, mostly things like a CB radio.
Mhm.
But everyone I've talked to, and they go, "Oh, that's a real nice truck," because the interior is in great shape and the exterior is straight, if not a little
Mhm.
bit unpainted. Um, but they say 125,000. Oh, that's just getting warmed up, and they're right. That engine is going to go a long time, and if I ever need it to, it's a dime a dozen to go ahead and find one and drop it back in.
Mm. Mhm, mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah, no one says that's a nice looking Jeep to my Jeep. That is
I know.
it's a little bit
Can I tell you why?
dented and kryloned.
Yeah, it's because it's not very nice.
Growing some moss here and there.
But it's
It
a functional Jeep.
might have something to do with the
It,
colony of mice that are living in its spare tire well, I think.
it lives a hard life.
At any rate, I am surprised. Power seats still work, power windows still work, the power
Wow.
sunroof still works, the driver information center that tells you how much fuel economy you are not getting still
Yeah,
works.
yeah,
Instrument
that's impressive.
cluster, yeah, cassette deck still works,
Okay,
for
mine too.
the
Mine too.
throwback people. So
Yep.
I am not worried about a lot of things when it comes to longevity. The things that I would be concerned about would tend to be what we've already discussed, the air suspension, things like that. But bottom line, keep it simple. If you really truly want to keep your car forever, buy the base model. Try and go as simple as possible. And I would also say,
Mainstream mass production.
yeah, I would also say, unfortunately, as much as I love a manual, don't buy the manual because not everybody shifts perfectly every time. You are going to have clutches that will wear.
Yep. Yep.
And
But at
worst
200,000
case,
miles, you are likely already replacing the clutch. Now, you can
yeah,
certainly go 200,000 with a single clutch,
yeah. If you do a
but
lot of highway
I,
driving, not a problem.
yes, yeah, but I would also argue that you maybe aren't getting the most out of your car if you're going 200,000 and have the same clutch. It depends on what you're doing and what you
Yeah.
need it for. I will add though, the most expensive car you can buy is a cheap old German car. Yeah,
This is true. Don't do
that is
that.
the most expensive car because when you're out car shopping, especially when you're younger, I remember in
Mhm, mhm.
my 18 to 24, it was like, oh, I could go buy this couple-year-old Honda Civic, or I could go buy this 10-year-old BMW M3, M5, and that would be a
No,
bad decision.
what you want is a really cool, like, baby blue 560 SEL. Mwah, that'd be all kinds
Hmm.
of fantastic. Might end up in the
Yeah,
poorhouse, though. That would be a different kind of problem.
right. So that's one of those things. It's if a car is cheap and you go, oh my gosh, it had an MSRP of this, and now it's only this.
Mhm,
There
mhm.
are reasons, and it's operational costs, not the upfront.
Yep. And, of
Yeah.
course, remember, they're not always going to be that safe, which leads us on to our second topic here, which is safety ratings. A lot of folks wanted us to talk about safety ratings.
Mhm.
Why does it take so long to get them? what goes into them and is there anything that people need to know. I will say, starting this out, that I really dislike NHTSA's safety ratings in the US
Okay.
right now. They have not been updated in quite some time.
Mm.
And it's important to know that you could end up in a 5-star crash test rated NHTSA vehicle where the dummy's legs would have indicated severe leg trauma, broken legs, etc. And you can still get 5 stars. I remember anecdotally here, and someone will have to correct us or post a link down there if you can find it in the comment
Mm.
section below. But there was a report, as I understand it, of a car that got 5 stars in NHTSA's rating, and it actually sheared the leg off of the crash test dummy, which is a metal leg. So if it shears the leg off,
It
usually
feels like
bad.
that should be an automatic fail of
Yeah.
sorts, you know?
But this is because they're using older test dummies. They're also, for some reason, not doing much leg load measurement there in the NHTSA test. And this is why I
Okay.
prefer the IIHS, or Insurance Institute for Highway Safety's crash test results. Or if you're looking at a vehicle that's European or is at least sold in Europe, you can also find the Euro NCAP scores. That's the European crash test agency that does the crash testing for most of the European Union.
Mhm.
Euro NCAP is really detailed. They will show you, for instance, in a crash style accident where the forces were across the torso, so you can see
Mhm.
how it's actually managing the forces from the seatbelt, the load limiters, how they're functioning. You can see on the dummies how the forces were applied to the head. It was their head trauma, etc. They even have child seat scores, rear passenger scores, rear end style scores, etc. So they're much more detailed than a lot of the scores in the U.S. I will also say on the IIHS front, they focus a little bit too much on things like headlight glare, which I know is annoying to other people
Mm.
out there on the road. But I would rather I would rather know more about passive safety. That's my personal thought on this
Mhm.
rather than some of the other components. IIHS also, of course, does a lot of active safety testing, so you can see how the ADAS systems do or don't perform, whether they'll take a vehicle to a complete stop with the obstacle, whether they slow it enough, etc. So that's where I would go.
You know,
The
on that note, you know, I've been we drive a lot of vehicles, and we only get a certain amount of time with them, and you know, whether we're out at an event or we have them at home. One of the things I was thinking about, and I don't know how you feel about this, Alex, is that we have started, I think, to talk about ADAS systems, right?
Mhm,
Advanced driver
mhm.
assist systems, and we go, this has ADAS, and these are, you know, we're at the point where we can't just start listing all those features because they're
Yeah, so
so
many.
encapsulating. You know, I think if we
Mhm.
wanted to do that, we would like group them, and it'd be our grouping. It has basic group, it has advanced group, it has super advanced group, something like that. But they are not all built the same. And I've
No.
got a vehicle right now that I have, and so you know, folks have listened, but I have a Tesla Model 3. I don't have the full self driving, but I use the autopilot system all the time, and I know where it's going to do something weird, and I know where I can be more comfortable with it. But by and large, it works pretty well. It's not like Super Cruise, but the system I have right now, I turned off the lane keeping assist because it's so bad that it'll make me sick. And I'm
Hmm.
not one who's sensitive to those sorts of things. So I don't know if we should start doing reviews on a separate thing and just saying, hey, this is this vehicle's level
Hmm.
two
Now
ADAS
I must
systems,
know.
and
What are you driving? I forgot.
do you want me to put it out there right
Of
now?
course.
I'm driving a Honda Accord.
Oh, yeah, Honda's is not great. I don't like their lane centering
It's
thing.
it's it's a
It's
problem, especially
aggressive.
when you get into a corner. It just really
Mhm.
doesn't seem to read the curve and know how to make one movement instead of a
Mhm,
bunch, and then
mhm,
you end up
mhm.
too far, and then it comes back, and then it freaks out. It goes, "Hey, I
Mm,
don't know if I can do this," and you're going. I mean, your hands are on the wheel the whole
mhm.
time, but you're going. This system's supposed to be working.
But see, lane
Uh,
centering, I think, is evil anyway and just should be
mm.
burnt at the stake.
And you and I live in some twisty areas, and one of the first things I turn off is that lane keep.
Always the lane keeping, yeah.
Because it's always trying to it freaks out. Anyway, it's one of
Lane
those things
departure
where I go,
warning, I
hey,
think, is handy.
yes,
It's the
important.
centering assist thing.
Yeah.
Not the biggest fan.
But I'm wondering if we should put together a small series and say here is the top end of each manufacturer's current ADAS systems and what they do and don't do, because this is Honda's not the only one here.
Mhm, mhm.
Although Honda also was stop and go traffic did a lot of that yesterday, but it's the Accord hybrid, so it did it very well.
Yeah.
When you're
Honda's
fully stopped, you have to go ahead and re-engage the throttle for it to start again after you've been stopped for too long.
Yeah. Honda's SIMS, or the collision mitigating braking system, is also super aggressive. Don't drive like an asshole if you have that enabled, because you will end up accidentally brake checking people. Just
Mm.
handy thing to keep in mind.
I
A
haven't
lot
run
of
into
the
that, so that tells you about my driving.
Yeah, but back on the
Yes,
safety
please,
topic
please.
here, we did get a lot of questions also about why we don't see all the vehicles that people are shopping for on all of these independent crash test
Yeah.
ratings here, and why, for instance, like the Grenadier is probably never going to get crash tested by anyone.
Right.
Remember that NHTSA buys the vehicles to crash test, so they're literally running out and buying a $50,000 car and slamming it into a wall, and so does
Yeah,
the
so expensive.
IAHS, which is logical because you do not want the manufacturer to provide you a perfect car that is going to
No.
perform exactly the way they want it to perform. And they do perform valuable services for the driving and automotive buying public because, for instance, if it wasn't for the IAHS's tests, we would not have known that, for instance, the Grand Highlander had an airbag problem. And there have been some other recent issues here with a number of different manufacturers. It's not Toyota's, uniquely Toyota
Right.
here, because in Toyota's internal testing, it did not occur, but then they admitted well, not admitted because they knew after the test was done, they were like, oh, whoopsie, something went wrong. And they went out and they redesigned the part. They had a stop sale. They then replaced the part on everything to try and make sure that the dummy's head was better controlled and better contained
Makes
in the
sense.
accident.
Definitely
So
appreciate it.
yeah, that's important to remember that they buy these cars, though. So if we're talking high-end luxury vehicles that are very expensive, or vehicles that just don't sell in huge volumes, read, Ineos Grenadier, it's
Mhm.
probably never going to get crash tested. You're probably never really going to know how that goes. Also, just because the crash test ratings are good in the test doesn't necessarily correlate to positive accident outcomes long term, et cetera. You can, Google all on that. We're just talking about standardized testing and what manufacturers are able to do within the confines of these standardized tests. Um, on the opinion side, personally, if I were shopping for a vehicle and I wanted the safest vehicle, I think I've said this before, but I would stick with a Volvo or a Mercedes because these manufacturers go above and beyond. And if you look at the history of the standardized tests in North America, in Europe, et cetera, by and large, Volvo and Mercedes are the companies where a vehicle is already on sale, is an older design, new crash test procedure comes out, they don't change anything, and the vehicle
Mhm.
still performs very well in those crash tests. And that is not something that we see in a lot of the other brands out there that are, reasonably steeped in safety. I would say Subaru and Honda have
Yeah.
have cultivated good reliability and safety reputations both, but those vehicles don't always perform that same way in these newer crash tests out there. I was surprised, for instance, that the Honda Odyssey and the Toyota Sienna minivans don't perform as well as I thought they would in the IAHS latest testing.
It seems strange. They're not the only minivans who have been lower than people have expected or really ought
Hmm.
to be. But you would think that a vehicle that is so purpose built to move people and their families
Yeah.
and don't have to be interesting at all, right? They're really not.
Hmm.
They are a functional vehicle. So the function should be move the people and their items safely and securely. And but it's a big structure, right? It's an
Hmm.
interesting structure. They're trying to keep them competitive, and right now they're really going head on against SUVs, which are are tough to begin with. But you would expect the minivan would be the safest vehicle on the road, full
Yeah.
stop. And they're not testing that way.
No, no. The It is an interesting read if you ever get a chance to go wander onto the IAHS website and
When
look
you
at
have a
the
few spare minutes and nothing better to do.
yeah, when you have some hours, you can then dig through the accident statistics reports that they have. Those are a fun read because a vehicle can be safe in the crash tests, and they'll break it out by trim in some of these tests on driver fatalities, other passenger fatalities, other loss statistics, because if people out there wondering what IHS is, it's the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety. So it is funded by the insurance companies. That's the key
Mm-hmm.
thing with the IHS, because the safer the car, theoretically, the less they'll
Lower
have to
the.
pay out
Yep.
when things go wrong. But they're also interested in all the other statistics around insurance claims and payouts on these vehicles. So this is kind of why some vehicles are more expensive to insure than others, even though they could be very safe. Like, part of why are Teslas expensive to insure, even though they're quote unquote safe? Well, if you look at the Tesla statistics there, you'll notice that a decent number of the models are above average in driver fatalities and other occupant fatalities, etc. And they're also expensive on comprehensive insurance because the parts can be expensive. But this
Mm-hmm.
is not because the car is unsafe, it's because the person behind the wheel is unsafe. Remember, different kinds of people collect in different kinds of cars. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's really cool when you look at the data and you're like, okay, you know, Durango is like averagey on safety numbers, right? And then you look
Mm-hmm.
at the accident statistics and Durango's like just about average in death and whatever on the regular Durango.
Mm-hmm.
Then you look at Durango SRT and it's like 5 times higher than average on the deaths and the accident statistics. And you look at Durango Hellcat and it's like 150 times. It's like bonkers out the window because, hello, you jammed 710 horsepower into a family SUV. What did you expect someone was going to do? They're going to go out and do stupid things.
And who's going to buy that one? So the thing with
Exactly.
Tesla, the hard thing with Tesla is, especially 10 years ago, right? Which is crazy at this point, but most people jumping into a Tesla were not driving really high performance vehicles. We get some of them, right? They trade in their S5 and their M5s and but
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the people were not driving really high performance cars. And Teslas from go have been high performance vehicles,
Mm-hmm.
and the way that they perform, the number of I ran into the building because I put it in drive instead of
Yep.
reverse was super high, because the torque output is so instantaneous that, oh my
Mm-hmm.
gosh, you don't have time to make a correction.
Yeah.
It's not saying well, pick the drivers, pick the problems, but it's one of those like hard to wrap your head around, because you go, this is a family sedan. Yeah, but under the covers, it is an absolute monster. Also, it's going to drive me it's going to drive me crazy to the end of time. When I was 23, 24, let's say 24, and I bought my Scion FRS, if I compared the insurance costs on my Scion FRS to a equally priced Corvette, which would have been a used
Mm-hmm.
Corvette at
Yep.
that point, which has double the power and way more top speed and all of these performance metrics, it was cheaper to get that Corvette because of who was buying them. It
Yeah.
was the
Old
age
people.
bracket of the Scion FRS versus the
Yeah.
Unreal. And I go, but mine only has 200 horsepower. And they go, yeah, but you're the one driving it.
Yep. Yep. This
No,
is definitely a factor. So,
no.
speaking of pricing, tariff drama has continued to unfurl. So let's talk
Oh,
about
doesn't
the
it always?
news.
Yeah.
The Volkswagen, just before recording this, Volkswagen announced they're taking a $1.5 billion hit due to tariffs. GM, this is
Ugh.
on the backs of GM announcing a $1.1 billion hit, Toyota
Mhm.
1.3 billion. Looks like Honda's about $2 billion impact. Stellantis 2.7 billion, because
And
Stellantis does so much Canadian and Mexican manufacturing.
but to clarify, these are not losses; they're more deficits, right? So
Oh,
we're not going
Stellantis,
in the
yeah,
negative, but we are
Stellantis is
we are
losing money.
losing what we had. Well, okay, that's fair. In most cases, hey, our projections are going to be way off because of these new tariffs.
Correct. And I should clarify, Stellantis had a quarterly loss, not a yearly loss. So they'll probably fix it by the end of the year.
Yeah.
But, definitely big impact on the tariff front, which is why some car companies out there are really, really squawking right now, because there was a recent agreement, theoretically, right, that
For now.
that for now, that Japan is going to get a 15% tariff. Now, ponder this for a second. So you build your car in Japan, tariffed at 15% to the US.
Hmm.
You could build that car in England and it would only be tariffed at 10%. So
Hmm.
kind of cheaper there, unintended consequence. Or you
Hmm.
could build that car in the US and probably still pay more in tariffs, which is what has General Motors, Ford, and Stellantis hopping mad.
But Alex, how does that work? Because it's built in the U.S., so there is no tariff.
Yeah, except that all the major car companies, because of NAFTA and just the synergies between especially Canada and the US for so long on the auto industry, For
Hmm.
the people that don't know geography, Detroit can see Canada from there. Like it is across the water. You could swim very easily from the one to the other as long as the water wasn't cold. It's
And
not
if
a
you're
very great
listening
distance.
instead of watching, you missed some great visuals there, but that's
Yeah.
okay. Maybe next time.
Yeah, it is not a fantastically long distance, and many bridges and trains and things like that go from one to the other. So, it made sense for car companies to have a transmission factory in Windsor and a body building factory in Detroit, and the axles came from somewhere else in Canada, but the gears came from the US. And so there's so much cross-border traffic. Literally, car parts and assemblies in cars could have crossed the border 100 times before they end up in really any of the big three's cars. So this is causing a
Yeah.
massive headache, and those are tariffed at 25%, because I don't know, maple syrup. Who knows?
Plus the cost of wages in the US being different than
Right.
it is globally. So
Yes. But oddly
what
enough,
a
wages.
pickle.
Yeah, wages are not necessarily the biggest impact on the price of a car per se,
Right.
because productivity can be different. So I'll let the economics professors talk about this on more. But if your hourly wage is higher, but your productivity is also higher, then it is not necessarily more expensive to have the labor here than there. So lots of things are going on in the cost structure, but this is also on the backs of South Korea going, hey, hang on a minute. Japan got a 15% tariff, but Japan didn't just invest $21 billion in building some new auto factories in the south of the US.
Yeah.
So, at any rate, it is a continuing drama. So keep your eyes on that. And we're going to talk about car shopping here in a bit. If you are planning on car shopping, do something soon, because car companies have said that they're going to be canceling models. They're going to be hitting pause buttons on models, and pricing will go up because they're not going to continue taking multi-billion-dollar hits every quarter. That's just not how companies work, right? They're going to end up raising their price, and then we're going to see slower car sales and an even more constricted market, et cetera, perhaps later. We don't know all the details. The writing is on the wall, though, how it's going to
But
probably
the
end up.
timing on that is super unfortunate because I have my eyes on a new vehicle, and
Mm-hmm.
it's just gonna get more expensive basically by the day.
Yes, it will. It will. It will.
Yeah.
So before we tiptoe into the car buying process, let's do one other suggestion from our fans on the YouTube channel who are answering what we wanted, what we should talk about rather. And this
Hmm.
is General Motors selling data from LexisNexis. So you can all wander out and Google. I believe it's Lexus with an I, with rather than a U. But at any rate, LexisNexis is kind of like a data selling, bartering kind of collecting group, and they buy information from insurance companies and sell to insurance companies. And there was talk about apparently OnStar selling data. I'm not sure how pervasive this is because we've seen some news reporting on this, but I was very sad because we have a vehicle with OnStar right now.
Hmm.
We had a vehicle with OnStar, a Chevy Trailblazer, and a Saab 97X, multi GMT 360 people here, with
Hmm.
valid OnStar. And we have a Durango, had two Durangos actually, with Chrysler's Uconnect, and bunches of other vehicles with their information services. So I asked for my LexisNexis data. You can actually write into them and see what they have on you. They were obligated to provide you a copy with the records. And I was sad. Can you guess what was on it?
Oh, did they not? Did they not want to track you?
Not a thing. I am
Oh
so
goodness.
sad. All they had on me was that I had a I that I- my memory is a little bit faulty here, but I believe they had my current car insurance policy on there,
Okay.
and they had a record of me switching from 21st century or whatever they called it at the time to USAA, like I don't know,
Hmm.
20 something years ago.
Hmm.
And that's it. That's all they had on me. I was
And that's
very sad.
interesting because that doesn't seem like it would necessarily come from the car company at all. I mean, it could
No,
obviously if
no, it
you
came
bought
from the
it and
insurance
you
companies. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So they haven't tracked your OnStar usage in the slightest.
No, they don't know where I
Man,
am or what I'm doing.
don't
And
you want to feel important?
I thought I was at least interesting enough to know something about. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if I want to know what they have on me. It's, nothing interesting most
okay,
likely, just like
write
yours,
in.
but but people are concerned, and I'll admit. So there was we posted a video just the other day about the Lyric and the Optic V's, and someone said, "Oh, and General Motors out to get your data." And
Mm-hmm.
I had, this is before I had seen this story, and I said, they're probably more interested in your data for themselves than they are to sell it. And I'm probably going to stand by that until I see something big that
Mm-hmm.
says, "Here's what they're selling off." But there's a big concern about data, and I don't know about you. I don't love the idea of all my business being out in the world, but I'm not that worried about it. And I'm not just of the opinion like, oh, if you have nothing to hide, there's no reason to
Mm-hmm.
hide it, whatever. Yeah, it's just my business. I'm generally a pretty private person, but they take my picture at the airport all the time. The government has my photos for driver's licenses and all of my personal information. And depending on who you ask, there's been a lot of access to that sort of information over the last 6 months. Do they have my car driving data? If it's randomized and they really are just
Mm-hmm.
going, hey, okay, bear with me. I'm not saying that good guy General Motors or good guy data collection, but if they're just saying, hey, what are average consumers actually doing with their vehicle? And that somehow is going to improve the ownership experience. Hey, by the way, they all go
Mm-hmm.
5 to 10 over the speed limit. Good to know. Then maybe we gear it towards those speeds versus just for this
Right.
test. Maybe we worry about the harmonics at this point versus that point. Maybe we increase the brightness because they're doing that on their own. Whatever those things are, that'd be great. But no, I don't want them to know when I'm speeding, when I'm
Yeah.
going too slow, where I park, when I park it. That's going to be too much.
This is the tricky part because all the data hoovering has
Hmm.
been logically part of the reason that Teslas have gotten better over time. Because
Exactly.
you think GM is sucking up data, just check out what Tesla's going on with their data.
All of it,
But
all the time.
right, but on the other hand, they have been able to tune their vehicles for better range over time, for better this and better that over time.
Better driving projections and
Right.
preheating the batteries and estimates for your trips, like
And
all of
this is the
that.
tricky part. Yeah, it's if you want that kind of feature set, that kind of improvement over time, you have to accept how you get there to start with.
Hmm.
And if you don't, then you buy something with a very basic not connected infotainment system, and there are definitely a
Hmm.
number of manufacturers out there that will sell you those. Fewer and fewer though, because of course Honda was one of the ones I would have gone to first for that sort of
Hmm.
system, because they tend to be very very segmented in the classic
Yeah.
Hondas until recently, where they had some telematics stuff, but they didn't really interact with the bulk of the infotainment system in the vehicle. There wasn't any tracking kind of thing going on there. But now
Hmm.
they've gone on the Google bandwagon. So now all
Right.
of that is integrated. But you know, there are definitely pros and cons to this privacy concern. The question in a way is sort of, aside from the manufacturers being nosy, what are they really going to do to this? I mean, yeah, okay, if
What's the
you're doing
risk?
something wrong,
Yeah.
the FBI will have your data, right? Eh, I don't know if that's necessarily bad. If you are in an accident, that's definitely a time where, the worries of the black boxes from the 1990s
Hmm.
and 2000s are definitely
Hmm.
here today, because
Will
they
this come
they
to court
know.
and I just
Yeah,
ended in an accident, but now it'll prove I was doing double the speed limit. Now it
right.
goes from an infraction to a felony and
Yeah. So
those
don't
sorts of
speed.
things.
That's the answer right there, right?
Right.
That's the tricky bit. But
I think where I'm at is I want options and I want clarity. So,
mhm,
as you know, I help people buy a lot of cars just in I guess what we'll call it my private
mhm,
life. This is what we do, and this is what I've done for a long time. And I was working with somebody who was very, very concerned. They work in cybersecurity in the US. They work in lots of sectors. And they said, I want to know who has my data and where. And there is not an easy way to go get it. This person is so plugged into these things,
yeah,
they would know where to go find it. And the question, you go to any dealership, they're not going to have an answer. They're not
no,
trained on this sort of thing. Where is my data going? Can my phone be connected to the screen using Android Auto without anything else being drawn from it, right? Is that a phone projection or is it data gathering? And
yeah.
it's
And
such a difficult question to answer.
the answer for people that are watching, Android Auto does hoover up more data and deliver that to Google than CarPlay does. So,
Mhm.
um, logical reasons theoretically behind some of that, but there is more data sharing on that front.
And for me, when I connect a phone, because we do it again all the time, I say, no, you can't have my messages. No, you can't have my
Mm-hmm.
contacts. But yes, you can have my Android Auto, right? And
Mm-hmm.
there's the connectivity.
Yep.
But it comes down to the choice. What I want is
But if
I
you say
want
yes to the
manufacturers.
and if you say yes to the
Yes.
Android Auto, though, then Google has things like your engine RPMs and your speed and all of that. More information, I think, than you're thinking. Of course, they won't have
No,
your
I no,
contact, but
I
yeah.
understand that, and that's that. For us, it's because somebody else is going to get in the car, and I go, I don't need my data
Mm-hmm.
having been stored there in that way. But I want people to be able to do features that are not baked in exclusively to apps. So, for example, the Honda Accord I have right now has a remote engine start, and it's right there on the key, so I can do that without having
Mm-hmm.
connectivity, but I can only do that if I can see the vehicle. Okay, good
Right.
to know. But there are a number of vehicles. I remember my Audi A3, which is a pretty connected car, but I had to pay $15 a month to access the remote engine start. And I know
Yep.
there's data, and I don't mind data connectivity and costs that go along with that, but that's a very low band thing. And I said, I'm not paying $15 to get a remote feature. Put it on my key, but it wasn't on my key.
Yep.
That's
Yep.
that's where I get a bit bummed out.
Yep. And just remember, everybody, when you have a connected car feature, remember that you have another cell phone, basically. There's a cell modem in the
Mhm.
vehicle. So there's a phone number associated with it, exactly the same cost that would be associated with any cell phone just hanging out there on the network. And so that's why that's there. Which
Yep.
brings us along to our abbreviated car shopping process general advice here. We'll have to go about this quickly because our episode is dragging on a little bit, but this is one that I know a lot of viewers were asking us to comment on, sort of what are our top hits, and maybe we'll have a more in-depth episode in the future on process. But what
So
are the
questions, leave those so we can come back to them.
indeed,
Yeah.
indeed, leave those down there. So I think I would start off with, make sure you actually need or want a new car and be clear-eyed about that process. Do you need it? Do you want it? I would also say remember that the worst time to buy a car is when you need a car. So your
Yep.
car has
Your car
died.
dies.
Right. It's in the shop. They tell you, wow, this thing is dead. It is not coming
Mhm.
back. It's not worth repairing. That is when a lot of people go into panic mode and then they go rush out and they buy a car. And
Es Especially if they're already at the dealer. They get their
yes,
car, go to
yeah,
the dealership, and they
yeah.
say, "I'm sorry, this one's
Hmm,
not
hmm,
coming back."
hmm. And the correct answer here is thanks. Take some time, rent a car. Just go
Mhm.
to Hertz or Enterprise or whoever, rent a car for a week, have a dispassionate thought process behind this and really decide what you need and what direction you should go in, and be prepared before you actually go to dealers to actually start shopping.
It's a stressful situation. Oh my gosh, my car has died. In the US, there
Hmm,
isn't public transportation. Like, how am I going to get to the places?
hmm,
It's going to cost me extra money. And, there's a chance that budget is a really big part of your car buying and the reason you're not getting that one repaired. And now what do you
hmm.
do? If you can borrow a car from a friend, if you can ask for a ride to and from work the next couple of days, if you can hop on that bus, it's not going to just save you money. It's going to save you, headache and heartache down the road. So the worst time to buy it is when you need it, but it's high stress. So we
Yeah.
we fully understand that.
And it is the biggest, weirdest purchase you'll ever make outside of a house, because buying so many other things that are more expensive than a car
Mhm.
can be easier. Trailers, much easier. And you can buy some really expensive trailers.
Mhm.
Side by sides, heavy equipment. Buying a tractor, so easy compared to buying a car. The process, the paperwork, why does it always take forever?
Yep.
It's easy to
Budget at least
see.
5 hours to purchase the
Right.
car.
It's easy to see why Tesla's direct sales model is so attractive, because for everybody that thought that this extensively long piece of paper that must be folded 5 million times to fit in an envelope is actually required by some sort of governmental body, guess what? It's not, because you can buy a Tesla with a single 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper and one little signature. So,
Mhm.
you know, the way that this has been structured by dealers and dealer associations and other people involved in this process to try and dot every I and cross every T and all the legalese, et cetera, is something that we all have to accept, that we do have to live with, but it's not actually required per se.
Mhm.
So that's pretty annoying.
Yeah, and again, the job is, especially at that dealership, if you're there, it's to get you out in the car. The hardest thing to do is say no. It
Hmm.
doesn't have to take that long. You can do a lot of this stuff online. So I would, if you can, if you have the opportunity, I would schedule yourself test drives and say thank you for the time behind the wheel. I will get back to you on my decision and leave. Leave as soon as you can,
Hmm.
and go drive your vehicles. You put together a short list, then go for a drive, shorten that list, do all of your research at home, and then start sending emails. What do you have this vehicle available, this trim, this color, and what is your out the door price? And do a copy paste of that and send it to your five closest, dealers of that brand.
Hmm.
And the one who comes back and says, "Here's the lowest price, we'll have it ready for you," still be ready to walk out of there. And I hate to say that because things can
Yeah.
change as soon as you get there.
Being ready to leave is definitely an important thing. You know,
Hmm.
go find a different dealer, and you can always go back if you decide that that was the best deal. It's there; they'll still be there. They'll be able to, handle
Hmm.
you again. The the other thing, which is sad in a way, is that haggling is not quite the art that it once was. There's a whole lot less haggle going on today. You can still do it, and it's still
Hmm.
possible to get a better deal, but don't expect some fantastic magical haggle that's going to get you to, whatever crazy multi-thousand-dollar number below their asking price.
Hmm.
Unless you're in a bad credit situation. If you've got bad credit and that kind of things, that's a problem. But generally speaking, most of the discounts have been baked in. You'll see the advertised prices around. It's gotten a lot easier to buy a car, especially in the last 20 years or so. Things have become a lot more above board, except for
Hmm.
the dealer markups that are still horrific and horrendous out there.
And a lot of those are clearly posted. You just have to know where to find them. So
Yeah.
if you're not familiar with the Monroney sticker, that's the
Hmm.
big thing in the window. Let me make sure I'm framed right. So you can
Hmm.
see what the vehicle does and doesn't have. And there is often another sticker right next to it that looks very, very similar. But if it is not within that main sticker, none of
Hmm.
that is required. None of that should be baked in. And frankly, I don't think you should pay for any of it. And if they
No.
say, "Oh, we already installed this protective package, it already
You
has
say,
this
great, take it out.
coating," and you say, "Well, I didn't ask for it, so I'm not paying for it," and they go, "Well, it goes
Right.
with the car," and say, "Well, you shouldn't have put it there."
Right.
Don't pay for those
And
things that you don't want to.
be prepared to say, "Oh, well, thanks very much. I'm just going to go ahead and go to that dealer across the street that didn't do that to the car. So,
Yep.
so peace out." That's perfectly valid to push a dealer to. They're not going to be able to take the coating off the car, but you can definitely say, "I don't want to pay for it. I'm not
But it didn't
interested in
cost
that."
them what it says on that sticker to go ahead and
Yeah.
put it on in the first place.
Right.
Just know that very
Hmm.
clearly.
Decide in advance whether or not you really want X, Y, and Z, or whether you're flexible on it, because that will also help inform your decision at some point. Because if you
Mhm.
go into the dealer, you're searching on the dealer website. It's always a good thing to do first. Search on the dealer website, see what they have in stock, see what's coming soon. You may get to the dealer and it sounds kind of bait and switchy, but there are many reasons why that car won't be on the lot. The website says it's there. By the time you get there, maybe it's not. Maybe it never was and their system wasn't updated. Maybe it's on a back lot somewhere and they just don't want to bring it out because they're lazy. It
Mhm.
could have been traded to another dealer, that day or that week, and nobody bothered to complete things. Many, many reasons why that could have occurred. If you want that exact specific car, be prepared to just go to another dealer. If
Yep.
you Because otherwise they're probably going to try and do the whole like, well, let's get you in this thing that's almost what you want. Well, if it's not
Mhm.
what you want, just go find another one. There's always another fish in the sea.
Alex, I think we do need a whole episode on this. I think we need some viewer questions that we can answer
Mhm.
specifically. You and I both have horror stories that we can say, we're telling you this because I think that's what we do for our next episode is we dive
Mhm.
into the auto buying guide podcast.
Yes.
We're here to tell you about the cars, but this is about the buying process. And it is so unfortunate because car buying, I think, should be fun. You and I are both automotive
Mhm.
enthusiasts. We love cars, and getting a new car should be fun and exciting. And even if it's just your tool, it's your transportation to
Mhm.
and from work, you're going to spend a lot of time there and you're going to spend a lot of money on the thing. So you might as well get the thing that you enjoy. So I don't know about you, but I think that's what we do it for next
We
week.
should. So we'll do next time. So be sure and post those questions down there. And then I will say that it is a distinct pity, and car dealers hate this thought. Car manufacturers are also frightened by it because I think
Mm,
that everybody in the auto industry is so entrenched in this process. But I have always said It's dumb that we don't have an SUV store or a truck store or a car store like you
Yep.
have a motorhome store. Like you go buy an RV or a motorcycle or an ATV or
Eight
so
to
many
10
other things.
brands all in
Right.
one spot.
Yeah, it's like sure there are places that specialize only like you go to the Harley dealer, you're not going to find, a Kawasaki there, but
Mhm.
but but there are plenty of mixed brand motorcycle stores and other kinds of vehicle stores that are much more expensive or the same price as the average car that's being transacted. But you can actually go there and go like, well, do I want the Polaris side by side or the Kawasaki side by side or the Honda side by side or the whatever? And they're they're just want to sell you a side by side. It's not they don't
Yep.
care which ones you buy, other than maybe their profit margins may be a little bit different. So they might try and steer you here, but at
Yep.
least they're willing to sell you all of these things, and you as a consumer can cross shop them all. You can drive these things side by side, side by side,
Mhm.
uh, and sorry, I'm laughing to myself here. You
Yeah.
can drive them all and make your own decision, but you can't do that if you just want a pickup truck.
I know. I know. And we don't and you and I don't have the funds to go ahead and throw that all together for everyone. So in the
Yep.
meantime, this is what we do.
Yep, and we would never be allowed to do it because the moment you would try and get a dealership franchise from any of those three and try and jam them together, you'd have lawsuits that you would never
But I
survive.
have a story, but that'll be for next time.
Yeah, so used car dealers, that's about all you can do. So,
Hmm.
alrighty, everybody. Well, thanks for watching, listening, etc. Be sure and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already done so. Enable the notifications. Find us on the alternate platforms and tell friends about us because we need friends apparently.
Indeed. And leave comments. If you're listening on a place you can leave comments, do so. If you're not, you can find us on our YouTube channel. You can certainly leave comments there. We will post in the next few days on our Facebook page, just Auto Buyer's Guide on Facebook, asking what do you want to know about the buying process. We'll put that all in for our next episode.
See you later.
Have a good one.